to go through some of the stories that I selected today from the newspapers. Constantine, this morning there's an interesting story in the Financial Times headline: UK tenants pay less than half owed in rent. Many decide to hold on to cash, triggering disputes with landlords in commercial and residential sectors. Basically, they're saying that, at the end of March, only 48% of tenants paid on time. And there's now fears that April, May, and June will be far worse, bigger defaults. What's your point of view on this story, and where do you, where do you sit on all these kind of issues to do with residential payments, mortgages, rents, and all that kind of stuff during this crisis?
I'll focus on the rents, and the emphasis of the article on private tenants is there are tenants who are not paying their full rent. I agree, but it's unethical to focus so much on private tenants. Apart from that, for the commercial side, there's something which is called force majeure. And force majeure is a contractual term mostly found in commercial contracts, allowing parties to exit or delay the performance of the contract if there are acts of God, for instance. So do those contracts have a force majeure clause? And there's the other clause, which is frustration. And can they possibly, it's the common law of frustration and sort of withholding rent. These things usually apply to ending the contract, okay? Ending the tenancy. Do they also apply to private, to the rental, to actually diminishing, reducing, not paying your full rent? That is a key issue. But we know very good landlords. I know very good landlords. But what has happened with many landlords is the way they have tried to exploit at the start of lockdown their private tenants. I can give you examples of the private landlord says, we're going to renew your tenancy only if you pay a year's rent in advance.
Right.
Well, a person cannot do this.
Yeah.
People who have reached the end of their tenancy and who are heading back to their home countries, and suddenly, all of a sudden, these people are not receiving their deposits because the landlord finds things to quibble.
The article, the article in the FT was also focusing on commercial properties, and what it was saying is that with, and I'm quoting directly from the article, with shops and offices closed and thousands of employees furloughed nationwide, many have decided to hold on to cash rather than pay rent. A move that has triggered disputes between landlords and tenants, and it's saying here that around 41% of commercial tenants have paid their rents on time. Residential landlords fared little better, with taking 44% of what they were due. These are big drops. And there's a quote here by a senior consultant, Steph Yates, saying here, these figures are likely to make uncomfortable reading for landlords, asset managers, and investors. Given, Con, that the economy has really, ridden on the back of huge property and real estate value increases and people doing the buy-to-lets, this is going to have a huge effect. This huge defaulting of rents in commercial and residential is going to have an absolute Armageddon effect on loads and loads of landlords who've basically created whole businesses based on their investments. What's your view on that?
How can they get out of it? How can you pay when you don't have the money? I'm talking for the commercial tenants. They have lost income themselves. Their businesses are collapsing. The only thing they have to hold on to is the actual property which houses their goods or their office or their personnel. If you take that away from them,
but surely
then it's not just one person who it's the whole setup, the whole company.
Absolutely. But surely the government here has to really intervene and support both the landlords and the tenants here. And because I'm not sure, and I haven't heard yet if the government has introduced a a freeze on mortgages or a freeze on rents at the moment. I'm still haven't I haven't seen anything yet there. I think in the United States they're moving in that direction, but the UK, I haven't seen anything yet that's saying that, for example, mortgage payments are frozen for 2 or 3 months until this is over. I mean, and the point you're making is absolutely valid. If you're not working, everything is closed. How do you, how is a commercial business gonna, who lives month by month, gonna pay its rent? How is somebody who's working in a I don't know, in a private sector company whose wages have not come in? It's all those things.
The article also only approached property management companies. It didn't approach tenants, private tenants' rights organizations, like, for instance, Shelter, to get their point of view. What's happening with the private tenants and all these things? It's very one-sided, and it's very pro property holder, pro landlords. And this makes me feel very uncomfortable. You also have a lot of many rents, I would argue, have to be slashed. When you build your, why shouldn't landlords go bankrupt? If a business is allowed to go bankrupt, which is renting property, but why shouldn't a landlord be allowed to go bankrupt?
They will go bankrupt with these defaults. There aren't. I mean, the banks are going to be.
Sadly, sadly, it's the small.
It's the small landlords that are going to, because
that is what hurts. Me.
The small landlords are going to get it. I mean, the banks are going to be. I don't think they're going to let down at all. I think they're going to go in to repossess a lot of the properties, even though there's this kind of mood within government to not allow things to go to court and to use these situations in mitigation, to not full on press ahead with repos. But I've got no sympathy for the banks. I have to say to you, they are absolutely ruthless. And a small to medium sized landlord who's got 10 to 20 properties, who's got leverage on these properties, and has defaults of this level. I mean, 41 to 44% in rent payments. You've got that nearly 60% default figure is huge, and it's going to bring a lot of people down. But the thing is,
like those. Check these numbers. This is one article coming up. This is one series of property developers.
Well, the thing is, I think it could be bigger. I think it could be even bigger than that, because if you look on the high street, I mean, who's operating at the moment? It's the groceries and
pharmacies,
and that's it. There isn't anyone else who's open and doing. Gyms are not open. All the other electrical stores on the high street are all closed. There isn't all the building
travel agencies,
all of those, so, and then those people employ people. They've got staff, so they obviously are sitting at home now and not doing anything. So the government has to do something big to avoid, because we've based our economy on property, on the value. I mean, the London property market is a currency in itself. It's a lot of investors were banking on London property, and now there's going to be a huge collapse in property values because
London depended as much on property as Greece depended on tourism.
Exactly that. Exactly that. That's a good point. So, that's a concerning development. If we now move on to our next story, which is from the Telegraph, it's why the system Boris Johnson built is unraveling in his absence. So the idea of government, centralized government, is fraying on a daily basis in the absence of the hospitalized prime minister. And it's saying, and this is from the Telegraph now. This is a conservative-leaning, supporting newspaper. First line of the article: when Boris Johnson's brutal reshuffle saw Sajid Javid replaced by Chancellor Rishi Sunak in an unprecedented Downing Street power grab, the Prime Minister was accused of real arrogance. All right, so taking over the treasury and appointed a cabinet of ostensibly supine ministers in hoc to number 10, the emergence of the court of King Boris struck some conservatives as being too Tudor, right? So the article here is basically, and it should be worrying Boris Johnson's supporters, that the Telegraph is now going hostile on Boris Johnson. The honeymoon period is truly gone, and they're now beginning to kind of question the mistake, I think, of not appointing a deputy prime minister, of not having experienced. I think the gist of the article is about not having experienced cabinet ministers in post, and you've got all of these guys who are rookies. That's all you've got. You've got a rookie cabinet in a massive crisis.
If we recontextualize this thing, what we're seeing is the Telegraph, which is a highly politicized newspaper, positioning itself and commenting on certain failures of government. We cannot see it as being a selfless position, which the Telegraph has. It has its own horses.
Yeah, of course. It's a
and what we're seeing is
there
there is no opposition, and I quite agree that there is no forceful opposition right now, because we need to have a united front. So the Telegraph suddenly jumps in as the major opposition to government.
That's a good thing, isn't that a good thing?
But the Telegraph has its own interests.
Well, every newspaper has. Every newspaper has, and all the journalists work for a particular editorial line, and that's democracy. All right. So anyone who says that's no, you know what? I've got no problem with that. I know the Telegraph is a right-leaning newspaper. I know the Sun, where it's coming from. I know that the Guardian is a left-leaning news. That's democracy, and I've got.
But you agree with what the Telegraph says.
I agree with what the Telegraph is saying, and the point you're making actually is a really important point, that the Telegraph is now holding the government to account, because the Labour Party is so shambolic still, and Keir Starmer's got a massive job ahead of him. These are the kind of things that Labour should be on, like all over the Tories. The fact that there's been absolute shambles from top to bottom in this government, the handling has been atrocious in this whole crisis. I don't care what anyone.
But the mishandling started in January with Boris Johnson.
And it started from him. It started from the fact that they Sajid Javid's removal from government, I think, was a huge mistake. They've got rid of every single experienced member of the Conservative Party from frontline politics and put in really a bunch of inexperienced guys and females to handle a government that has got huge problems to deal with. They need.
So what you're saying, there should be a secondary shuffle.
There should be a national government. There needs to be a national unity government, and bring in the best of British into government to deal with the crisis. These guys are out of their depth. They just have got no idea about what they're doing. I mean, look at the briefings. Look at the briefings that they've been doing. I mean, it's horrendous. All right. The British government has major things to answer for at the moment, right? And the rising death toll in the COVID-19 is an absolute disgrace. An absolute disgrace. We acted late, all right, when we should have acted much quicker, all right? And the handling of this whole situation is an absolute. Honestly, I'm really annoyed with it. So this, the story by the Telegraph today, all right, it should be a wake-up call to the Tories that it's not a honeymooning government. You're going to have, blue on blue, which is the worst kind of, attack that the Tories are worried about. They are always worried about their own side. They're not worried about Labour. Labour are way off the mark still. They're not even in. I would say Keir Starmer, if he's in post and he remains Labour leader and he doesn't
he will.
Right, if he remains leader, he needs a good 2-3 years in office, all right, to get his team together, to get his brief together, to get into the rhythm of being the leader of the opposition, all right, and win a couple of elections. In the meantime, who's going to keep check of the government. Boris Johnson is incapacitated. He's out of action.
Do you agree with that some Tories are pointing the finger at Cummings? Is he the scapegoat?
Absolutely. Cummings is absolutely, he wanted to make Boris Johnson a POTUS figure, to be like a presidential prime minister, when we have a system of cabinet government where you need a collective cabinet approach. Now, because of the crisis, he's now having to resort to that. All right. And what do you have around the cabinet table? A bunch of ministers who have got no real experience of anything, zero, really, and it's atrocious when you see it. And this is what.
But it's not just government that runs a country.
No, it's the civil service. But look at the civil service. Look at the civil service. If you look at who is in the posts of civil in the big departments, then you should be worried. This is the thing. So these are the things that I'm also very worried about, is that we should be bringing in people from the private sector into government now who've got real experience of big stuff, of big, like what they're doing in America.
Conflict of interest.
Bring it. No. In a national crisis, you bring in the best that you've got in the nation. You bring them into the ministries to handle the situation, because it's unraveling. It's unraveling. We're not, we are not dealing with the scale of the problem in the National Health Service is huge. They've went and built this Nightingale hospital that can hold 4,000 beds, but where's the staff to go with it? Where are we
been recruiting for that?
Where? I mean, we've got a massive shortage of nurses and doctors in the NHS. They're all up to their limits. They're just about dealing with it. Who's going to be going into that? I mean, I read a report that
there's a third factor. It's not just the civil service. It's also we, the citizens, who maintain standards, who maintain social cohesion, who respect the law, who are law-abiding citizens. And that is also a very powerful source of stability. So it's not just government, it's not just cabinet, should I say. It's not just cabinet.
No, but in my main point is that this government didn't take the threat of COVID-19 seriously enough, quickly enough. It's in catch-up mode. It's in crisis mode now. We're way into it now. All right. We've got these nonsense things now about, should we lock down? Should we not go for a complete lockdown? Like there was this thing about the Northampton police yesterday. The chief of police in Northampton was ordering his officers to check to see if people were going out for shopping or not, or they were facing arrest or fixed penalty notices. So there's confusion there about what the lockdown actually is. We're in the bank holiday weekend. The weather's good. Naturally, people want to go out and they want to enjoy the good weather. They want to go out and walk. They don't want to be locked up at home. But because the messages have not been clear from the government, it hasn't been clear. All right. The comms has been awful from the government, even though they do these daily briefings and you say, what are they saying? What are they saying? All right. And the journalists who ask them the questions, I mean, be more aggressive, hold them to account. Do you know what I mean? This is people are dying on a daily basis. All right. The issue with the numbers of deaths every day. All right. We're not being given actually the true figure. They're not the actual accurate estimate. I mean, these are estimated deaths, and they're not even taking on board about the deaths in the care homes. They're not being included.
In home. Can I give an example? There's a close friend whose neighbor died of a heart attack in his garden. He died at 12:30 2 days ago.
Right.
They came and took him at 6:30. For 6 hours, he was lying dead.
Gosh.
And that is how long it is taking. The volume of departed, of deceased, is so great that they cannot respond immediately.
No, they can't. Look.
6 hours lying in his garden. Can you imagine what his family went through?
Exactly. In normal circumstances, the NHS is running close to the wind. It's running close to the edge anyway, right? This is pushed it way over its capacity. All right. So this lockdown, all right, is, you know, an attempt to try and deal with the most urgent of the cases that are coming in. I know a case as well of someone who has had serious symptoms of COVID-19, who is in the mid 60s, early 70s, needed to see a doctor. The doctor was not able even to come and see them. It was just a phone call. And this man is now in a critical condition. All right. I mean, this is our National Health Service. This is the way it's collapsing at the moment. All right. So I don't have any prescriptions.
Therefore, what you're saying is the government has to come up with an uncompromisingly clear message.
It's got to be clear. We need to tell people that for the next 2 to 3 weeks, they need to stay at home. They need to really listen to the, you know, government warnings about the threat of COVID-19. We're reaching the peak. We're not even close to the end yet. So don't start talking about ending the lockdown, because we're not near to that.
Not.
All right. And really understand the threat that this thing is having. It's a disease that you may be carrying it and you don't even know you've got symptoms, but you could spread it. All right. People are dying with no underlying health problems. So this is the thing now, is unless we take it seriously, we're facing economic collapse. You know, the health of the nation is at risk. And I'm not like you know, being sort of overly alarmist about this. It's the reality.
No, it's the reality.
It's the reality. So we just need leadership from the government to give us confidence. And unfortunately, Boris Johnson, all right, he's ill, he's in hospital, hasn't been a leader. He hasn't been a leader. He took
I have a bone to pick as well with the major media. They're not in touch with grassroots level, and I don't like the questions they're asking.
What do you mean?
For instance, when you have press briefings, and immediately you go with first the BBC, and then those big names. They're out of touch, those big names. I don't like the gotcha school of journalism which Koonsberg represents.
I don't agree with you on that. I mean, you know, when you say they're out of touch, they are people like us who live in, you know, in the same neighborhoods as us, and they live in the same. They're not out of touch in that aspect. What it is that look, when you're a lobby journalist,
you can't have gotcha style questions.
No. But you need. I mean, there's a fine balance, right? John, from his house on his YouTube channel, can air as much spleen as he wants. But when you're a lobby journalist and you're credited, you've got to play by certain rules. There's certain ways of asking questions. They can't say to Boris or the Chancellor, you know what, you've ballsed this up. You've totally hashed this up.
That is not what I'm pointing.
All right. You know, going for the sensation.
It's being able to digest a sort of certain attitudes which are prevalent.
Yeah.
And which are rampant,
like
because of the lack of message, and present those to government.
Yeah.
People are scared, heckless of joggers. I mean, I've seen people shouting at joggers when I go out for my exercises, because joggers shoot past you, breathing heavily, bump into you. Do you know how many people joggers rush past? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20. Some of them are.
So what do you propose? Do you propose people stop jogging on the roads?
Yes, absolutely. Stop it.
All right.
Absolutely. Go where there's open spaces. There's a difference between jogging and cross-country running. I was brought up with cross-country running. Cross-country running means you stop, you start, you avoid obstacles, you continue. You know, you respect what you come across.
Right.
Joggers, it's like the exterminator.
I mean,
you have a straight line, you go in that straight line, you huff, you puff, you spit, you snort, and you leave behind you an aerosol. That's what they call it, an aerosol of viruses.
Yeah.
It just lingers in the air.
Yeah. I mean, my main problem with that is
government can no more jogging.
You know, going on the road, especially in areas where there's a high density population, right?
Paths.
All right, paths where you know there's going to be people, is an arrogance. It's like the cyclists as well, right? certain cyclists who think that they own the roads, and we have to. All right, no, that you have to respect the fact that there are other people around you, and you're not going to give way if you can't. And also, this COVID-19 crisis has created a huge problem for joggers, and they should be, like you said, going into open spaces. But that goes away from the main point I'm trying to make to you, is that being a journalist today,
journalists can present that
have got one of the most, I think they've got one of the most important jobs alongside the frontline workers that are going out risking them. The journalists have to hold the government to account. They've got to do their job. The journalists now have got to really ask the questions of the government. Where were they? What resources? What, and stop and if Cummings and all his honchos in number 10 think that they're going to spin at this time, they've got another thing coming.
Can I ask you, what does it resolve, this current situation? You see, if you ask the question, where were you? This doesn't even, whether you get a correct answer or sort of a fobbing answer, how does this help the situation?
No, that doesn't. I mean, that doesn't help the prime minister, or the government. But when you look at it's saying in the Telegraph, one senior Whitehall source involved in drawing up the UK's pandemic plan said the lack of planning for a disease sweeping through Downing Street had made it more difficult to operate a clear chain of command. We never planned for the Prime Minister to be taken out by a disease like this, or for who might take over, or the exact chain of command. Why not? Why did not? I mean, surely there needs to be that program on Netflix, the designated survivor. If the government fails, who takes over the government in a situation when the Prime Minister's incapacitated? And then I'm just reading you this last bit saying the problem now is that we never planned for ministers to be taken out one by one over a period of time. That's clearly led to some confusion over who is in charge of what. I mean, that does not give me any confidence at all. There should be a clear chain of command about who is responsible for what, and we should be, and there should be clear, this is your area of expertise, this is what you should be doing, this is what, and leadership. And leadership is what we need now, not nonsense, media speak. We need to have people standing up and saying, right, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to get this done, we're going to get the economy. But I mean, this failure even, Con, and you may want to...
But we're saying this lot are incapable of taking that stand.
No, these guys are spineless. This particular government now, I mean, in terms of if you did a 0 to 10, they're near to 0. Every single one of them. None of them impresses me at all. Matt Hancock, for me, kind of stood out a little bit, but I'm not impressed with the Chancellor. I'm not impressed with any of them, because there seems to be a lack of understanding as to still the bad stuff is ahead of us. All right. This is the month now when the defaults are going to go up through the roof. The wages are not going to start coming into people's banks. And they're going to start really wondering, how am I going to get through? How am I going to feed my family? The universal credit that they've asked people to apply for isn't ready until June. So you're going to have another 2 months, potentially, of no money at all coming in. So this is where...
I think there should be people who are being furloughed. I still haven't quite managed that word. There should be a standard minimum salary. It does. If you were earning 80,000, 100,000, or 20,000 a year, people should be receiving, let's say, 25. Why should people who are earning 100,000 or 300,000 be receiving at the receiving end of 80% of their salary?
Yeah.
That I don't understand.
Yeah. Okay. And just the final story today. I saw a story which is quite, I mean, it's a little bit off. It's not a domestic story. It's a story about Turkey sending Israel some COVID-19 face masks. Excuse me, sorry. Some hay fever. Some COVID-19 masks and some shipments of PPE equipment to Israel. So I just wanted you, because I know you're interested in kind of like the situations in Turkey, to kind of go over that story if you want in a bit more detail.
Before I get, you just sneezed. I said bless you. Do you know where the bless you comes from?
No, tell me.
Well, during the last major plague, which was the bubonic plague, which also came from China.
Bubonic plague. Okay.
When people used to sneeze, they would die soon after that. So therefore, when a person sneezed, he immediately jumped in, giving you a blessing, their blessing, like, and bless you, which is, and this has survived in today. When someone sneezes, we say bless you.
Right.
And we say this in French as well.
Right.
So anyway.
Right. So going back to the story. Going back to the story
back to
now.
The story. What Turkey is doing is selling those masks, and in condition that it will be allowed to provide humanitarian aid to the Palestinians. That's the full picture.
All right. Okay. So Erdogan again is using his kind of his Ottoman style of bartering and kind of.
No, I don't think so, because if suddenly in Gaza, for instance, you start having 1,000, 2, 3, 10, 20,000 people dying because of the Israeli blockade, it's not going to look too good on Israel to have that. Also, since 2010, when Israeli-Turkish relations deteriorated, what happened, what was affected was arms trade. But everything else was continuing as normal between Turkey and Israel.
Yeah.
So there was never, I think, any deep enmity. It was just a question of two countries.
I mean, I see
determining how strong they were in the region.
Sorry, I think eventually Turkey and Israel will get it together again.
Of course, I think they are together.
Yeah, I don't see this kind of story that's being played out in Nicosia and in Athens, that there's this honeymoon between the Greeks and the Israelis. It's not exclusive. It's not exclusive.
Crassly ignorant.
It is. I mean,
attitude I've come across.
Yeah, I mean,
Nicosia and Athens.
Yeah, I mean, Israel is going to look after its own interests and will have alliances, relationships with whoever it sees best for its own national interest, and
for its it doesn't just have what has shifted in the 21st century. It doesn't just have national interests; it has regional aspirations, and there's a big difference between national interest and regional aspirations.
So the Bloomberg report is saying here that relations sharply deteriorated between Ankara and Tel Aviv in 2010 when a Turkish flotilla bound for Hamas was raided by Israeli commandos, resulting in the deaths of 10 civilians. Turkey then expelled the Israeli ambassador, recalled its own envoy, and pulled out of joint war games. While Israeli military sales to Turkey were halted, other trade ties proved resilient.
Exactly, completely.
So 3 planes from Israel expected to land in southern Incirlik to pick up the cargo on Thursday. And with the shipment not asked to be named, discussing sensitive issue, Turkey will donate medical aid for the Palestinians within the next few days, the official said. Israel has confirmed about 9,000 cases of the virus, the COVID-19, and 50 deaths, and authorities have rolled out steps to protect the economy. So, yeah, I mean, it's
interesting that the first virus cases in Greece came from Greek pilgrims.
Exactly, I was
going to say the Holy Land.
I was going to say that. Yeah, it was. They came fully loaded up with COVID-19, so it was But it's interesting though to see that this kind of, and we may talk about this at future times when the COVID-19 thing is over. But the whole dream of particularly the Greek Cypriots to build this LNG base in the Eastern Mediterranean.
Can you say what LNG is?
Which is, a liquid gas, the natural gas exploitations around Cyprus, and so it's the area between Egypt, Lebanon, Israel, and bits kind of around there. So it's now disappeared. I think with this COVID-19 crisis, the LNG project's now going to be kind of forgotten about. I don't think anyone's got any stomach at all, especially with the price of crude oil dropping to like historic low levels, and the Saudis and the Russians.
I don't think it was ever wrong.
No, but I think now there's an oversupply of natural gas and crude oil in the market, so there isn't really that thirst for that at the moment. So I think those projects will be put away. But on our final point today as well is going
Before you
into
do the final point,
yes,
I just forgot to show this regarding tenancies.
yeah.
This is a book.
Oh,
It's a thick book.
bedside reading for you. All right.
On it's about private tenancies. Very thick. It has to be rewritten in parts because what is happening now is not included in this book. That's how important the impact on private tenancies is. This book would need to have so many more pages in order to be up to date. Anyway, sorry, you were saying.
No, so just the final point, we're going into Holy Week for the Orthodox Christians. The Archbishop of the Greek Orthodox Church, Nikitas, gave me an interview yesterday, which I put online. His main comment...
Who is the Archbishop of Thyatira in Great Britain?
Yeah, he basically has jurisdiction over the Greek Orthodox Christians in the UK, which I think is the largest Orthodox Christian community in the UK at the moment.
By far.
Yeah, by far.
By far.
Yeah, and his views were that for this year we should stay at home for Easter. We shouldn't be going to church, but watch the services online and on live feeds that are coming in from in the UK. It'll be London Greek Radio that's broadcasting live services. In Greece, you can go to various, there's the 4E channel, Ecclesia TV, loads of other links there. But stay at home. And for those fasting and on Lent, you break your fast on Easter Sunday with your family. And you're not taking communion physically this year. But when churches resume, you take your communion on your Sunday liturgy. But he was very understanding, and I found him very interesting actually to speak to, because he really understood the urgency amongst government to keep people safe, not to take risks, not to go out and do things that are not necessary. So what do what's your view on that, Con? Do you want to say something on that?
Regarding fasting, there's a clause in Greek Orthodox fasting which is asthenike odipori, which means fasting can be broken if you're a traveler or if you are unwell, in which case you're fasting. And Orthodox fasting means no meat, no cheese, no dairy products. So therefore, if you are unwell, then you can eat of those foods. And many people, unfortunately, aren't feeling too good. And therefore, even if they're not exactly breaking the fasting, but they are sustaining their lives by eating certain foods. What perhaps I would like to see more from all the faiths, including the Greek Orthodox faith, is some spiritual comfort. And that absence is quite telling.
I think there is I disagree. I think there is a volume of if you go online, of prayers. And
if you go online,
yes, but of course we can't. Yeah, but you can't do anything else at the moment. There can't be visits by clerics to people's houses. You can't go to church.
How were saints made? Saints would go and put their lives in the front line in order to give comfort.
Yeah,
the sacrifice.
Yeah,
the sacrifice of 2 or 3 or 4 saints, imbued with hope.
Yeah.
A whole swathes of the population.
Yeah.
We cannot have clergy saying, we'll sit at home because we're safe, and you search the internet. No, you follow the lives of the saints.
I think there's an in-between. I think there's been a failure by the clerics to use online enough. They should be now engaging with people as much as possible via Zoom, via Skype. They should be doing WhatsApp calls. They could be doing daily prayer sessions where people can engage. For the elderly that don't have that, it's a problem, right?
So, I think if
that's
a priest, if a bishop, if an archbishop goes into a COVID hospital it needs
They're not
patience.
allowed. They're not allowed. No. They're
It
not.
will have a far greater impact.
They're not allowed. They're not allowed. No. They're not allowed to go in. They're not allowed to go in. They've been told by Public Health England they are not allowed to go in. We've got cases, Constantine. We've got cases of Orthodox Christians who have passed away, and they're not allowed to have even the last rites. They weren't even allowed to be given before they left us. And even at the burials, there's problems now because the actual direction is to cremate them, and we don't cremate bodies; we bury them. So there's a big problem there. It's not an easy thing.
So what happened to sainthood in our day and age?
I don't know what to say. I mean,
we had saints coming out of the Smyrna Holocaust, which was the destruction of the Greeks, of the Asia Minor genocides we had from the fall of Constantinople. From all those saints emerged. Where are the saints today? Where are the saints from our churches? Where are they to be found?
Well, they're
the living saints.
Yeah. On that point, Con, thank you. Have a good weekend, and we'll speak again next week.
Thank you so much.
And that's my last broadcast live. I will speak next week.